"No, I won't let hunger claim another one of us." The biting Yakutian wind whipped Anya's face, tears freezing before they even fell. Her eyes swept across the endless tundra, where the promise of life was as deadly as that of death. Her people depended on her, the widow who should never have wielded a spear against the legendary 11 0.0-pound buffalo, but upon whom fate had imposed the heaviest burden. The ground trembled beneath her feet, a primal roar tore through the icy silence, and what she saw, a monster of flesh and bone emerging from the blizzard, made her heart beat like a war drum, knowing this would be her last act. And what she did now would seal her village's fate forever. The monster, a hairy mountain of muscle and horns sharp as ancient knives, stopped a few yards away, its warm, heavy breath forming dense clouds in the frozen air. Its small, dark eyes fixed on Anya with an intensity that seemed to pierce her soul. A shiver ran down her spine, not just from the bone-gnawing cold, but from the visceral fear that paralyzed her. Her legs felt rooted to the ground, every fiber of her being screaming for her to flee, to return to the relative safety of the village, to the arms of her little granddaughter Lyra, who awaited her with eyes full of hope. But the image of Lyra, with her pale cheeks and lips cracked by hunger, was the shield that protected Anya from her own cowardice. She gripped the spear with her gloved hands, feeling the weight of the worn wood, a gift from her late husband, Boris. He always said that true strength wasn't in muscles, but in a heart that refused to give up. A stubborn tear, warm for an instant before freezing, traced a path down her time-worn face. "Boris," she whispered to the wind, "give me your courage now." The buffalo snorted, a guttural sound that made the snow vibrate. It was a magnificent animal, a force of nature that dominated the tundra, and Anya, a small, aged woman, seemed insignificant before such power. The village elders, their voices heavy with skepticism, had tried to dissuade her. "A woman cannot bring down the tundra buffalo, Anya. It's a job for the strongest men, and even they have failed." Words of disapproval echoed in her mind, an obstacle as icy as the environment around her, but she knew there were no longer strongest men capable of such a feat. Sickness and hunger had claimed many, and those who remained were too weak for this battle. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. She remembered her grandmother's tales of huntress women who in ancient times used cunning where brute force failed. "Observe, learn, wait," her grandmother's soft voice seemed to whisper in her ears. Anya began to move, not running, but sliding sideways, her eyes fixed on the buffaloes. She knew a direct attack would be suicide. She needed to find a weakness, a vulnerable spot in its armor of flesh and bone. The animal followed her with its gaze, its massive head swaying slowly, as if assessing the small figure before it. Anya noticed the way the buffalo bore its weight, slightly more on its left front leg, an almost imperceptible movement, but one that, to the trained eyes of a huntress, even one inexperienced with such prey, could be a clue. It was a tiny detail, but in a duel of life or death, every detail mattered. She felt a new wave of determination. It wasn't about the strength of her arms, but about the strength of her mind and the purity of her purpose. She wasn't there for glory, but for love. The fate of her village, Lyra's future, depended on her ability to overcome not only fear, but also everyone's expectations. With a final look at the giant, Anya tightened her grip on the spear and took a calculated step forward, her heart beating with the promise of an uncertain, yet still possible future. Anya took the step, spear raised, not in a direct attack. It was an invitation, a dangerous dance on the frozen tundra. The buffalo, with its imposing mass, snorted, vapor rising from its nostrils. It turned its head, following Anya with dark eyes. She remembered the patience of great hunters, her grandmother, who said, "Nature reveals its secrets to those who know how to observe without haste." Anya sought these secrets in the giant. She noticed that when turning, the buffalo leaned more on its left front leg, a subtle imbalance. The colossal weight of the animal over the years had created a slight inclination, a weakness in its gait. A spark of hope ignited in Anya's chest, warming her against the cold. It wasn't a weakness that would make it easy, but one that would make it possible to exploit. Anya began to move in slow circles, maintaining a safe but provocative distance. She wanted the buffalo to follow her, revealing more of itself. The icy air cut her skin, but she barely felt it. Her mind was focused, every sense sharpened, the smell of the earth, the sound of the howling wind, the sight of the buffalo, all blended into a symphony of survival. Suddenly, the buffalo lowered its head, scraping a horn on the frozen ground, a warning. Its muscles tensed, and Anya knew the attack was coming. She positioned herself, spear firmly gripped, not for a direct blow, but to deflect and guide. She couldn't fight brute force. She needed to use its own strength against it. The buffalo charged, an avalanche of flesh and fury. The earth trembled under the impact of its heavy hooves. Anya did not flee. Instead, she waited, her heart pounding in her chest, memories of Boris and Lyra giving her a courage she never knew she possessed. At the last instant, with the horns inches away, she threw herself to the side, rolling in the snow, spear extended. The buffalo passed her, its massive body creating a vacuum of air. The moment it lost its balance, Anya propelled herself, using the spear to support and direct her movement. The tip of the spear, without piercing, touched its side, subtly pushing it to the left towards its inclination. The buffalo grunted, confused. It turned sharply, eyes flashing, but Anya was already moving away, preparing her next step. Fatigue weighed heavily, but urgency kept her alert. Every movement was a calculation, every breath a prayer. She fought for every hungry soul in the village. Lyra was her beacon. Anya knew that every step, every deflection was love. She needed to be faster, smarter, more resilient. The fight was not just physical, it was a test of her will, of her faith in ancestral wisdom, and of the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the buffalo, ready for whatever came next. Anya felt the intense cold of the tundra penetrate her fur clothes, but her mind was ablaze, ignited by urgency and love. The buffalo, a colossal mass with menacing horns, waited, dark eyes fixed on her with savage intelligence. There was no haste in the beast's gaze, only an ancestral patience, the same Anya tried to invoke. She knew that every movement was a gamble of life or death, every second an eternity under the pale Yakutian sun. The image of Lyra, with her large, hungry eyes, and the promise of a future for her village were a constant reminder of what was at stake. A burden carried with dignity. She began to move again, a slow, calculated step to the right, dragging her feet in the deep snow. The buffalo turned its head, following her with majestic slowness, but attentively. Anya observed the subtle lean on its left front leg, the small inclination she had perceived as a crack in the giant's armor. It was the key, the thread of hope in a labyrinth of frozen despair. If she could unbalance it, if she could guide it to where its own strength would become its weakness, perhaps there was a chance. The wind howled like an ancestral spirit, bringing snowflakes that whipped her face, scratching her cold, chapped skin. Anya felt the pain, but ignored it, transforming it into fuel. She remembered Boris's lessons, how he had taught her to read nature's signs, to listen to the tundra's silence, full of voices. "Anya," he would say with his deep, gentle voice, "a hunter's strength is not just in their spear, but in their heart that beats with purpose and in their mind that sees beyond the obvious." She gripped the spear, feeling the cold, familiar wood, a piece of him in her hands. The buffalo snorted again, a deep sound that reverberated in the icy air, making the fine snow vibrate. It took a step forward, slow but menacing, its hooves breaking the ice crust with a dry crack. Anya did not retreat. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, a silent invitation, a calculated provocation. She wanted it to follow her, to tire itself, to reveal more of its movement routine and its limited patience. It advanced, not in a furious run, but in a heavy, inexorable march, an avalanche of flesh and will. Anya waited, her heart beating like a war drum in her chest, echoing the beats of her ancestors. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, clear as mountain air. Be like the snow which yields underfoot, but shapes the landscape with its persistence. Nudaid. When the beast's horns were a few feet away, its colossal shadow engulfing her, she threw herself to the side, rolling in the deep snow, spear extended not to attack, but to guide. The buffalo passed, losing its balance for an instant, exactly as Anya expected its natural inclination would cause. The spear, without wounding, touched its left side, a subtle push that made it stumble further in the direction of its weakness. It grunted, a sound of confusion and fury, turning with surprising speed for its size. But Anya was already on her feet, moving away, her eyes fixed on every movement of the giant, anticipating its next step. Fatigue began to set in her muscles, a dull ache that threatened to steal her agility. But adrenaline and urgency kept her on high alert. She knew she couldn't falter, couldn't afford a mistake. Every maneuver, every deflection was a silent prayer for the life of her village, for the warmth Lyra and the other children needed to feel again. Lyra, with her innocence and her hunger, was the fuel that propelled her, the reason for every painful breath. Anya wasn't just hunting. She was defending, protecting, loving with a ferocity that only a mother and a grandmother could understand. She needed to be more cunning, more patient, more resilient than anyone could imagine. The fight was a dance of life and death, a brutal ballet in the white, silent vastness. Anya felt a connection to the earth, to her ancestors, to the very spirit of the buffalo. She did not hate it. She respected it as a force of nature. But the survival of her people was paramount, an imperative that transcended any other emotion. With a heart heavy with the task, but an unwavering will, she prepared for the next confrontation, knowing that night was approaching and with it, new dangers, an even crueler cold, and the promise of a challenge that would test the limits of her soul. The tundra was relentless, but Anya was the hope of her village, and that hope would not bend. Anya watched the sun, already low on the horizon, painting the tundra in shades of orange and purple. Every minute brought a sharper cold, a deeper darkness, and the invisible threat of night, of freezing. The buffalo snorted, its breath forming dense clouds. It seemed to sense its prey's frustration. Anya felt a chill from the awareness that her chances diminished with each shadow. "Patience, Anya," her grandmother's soft voice echoed in her mind. "Night hides the hunter. Use it." She needed to use the darkness to her advantage, to turn disadvantage into opportunity. Her eyes swept the landscape, searching for a rock or a depression in the snow for tactical advantage. The tundra, however, was a relentless expanse of whiteness and ice without refuge. The buffalo charged again, with more impetus, as if its patience was running out. Anya waited, muscles tense, her heart beating a rhythm. She remembered her promise to Boris and Lyra, never give up, never. At the last second, with the horns a hand's breadth away, she lunged to the right, spear extended, to deflect the fury. The buffalo's horn grazed her shoulder, the wind from its movement knocking her down. She rolled in the snow, feeling the icy impact, but quickly got up, her eyes fixed on the giant. The buffalo spun, its colossal mass creating a whirlwind of snow and frustration. Anya noticed the hesitation, the imbalance in its left front leg, more pronounced by the effort and rage. It was the chance she had been waiting for, the crack in the beast's armor. She ran, not towards the buffalo, but in a wide arc, seeking to flank and direct it. The buffalo followed her, its movements heavier, each step sinking deeper into the snow. Anya realized that fatigue was beginning to affect it, a small victory. She needed a foothold, her eyes fixed on a small elevation of ice and rock. It was an immense risk. If the buffalo reached her first, it would be the end. But hope, tenuous as the setting sun, propelled her. With a renewed breath, she ran towards the elevation, spear wielded as an extension of her unbreakable will. The buffalo, sensing her intention, accelerated, a deep roar escaping, echoing in the immensity. The distance narrowed. Anya felt the ground tremble, the animal's warm breath on her back. For Lyra, she thought, the image of her granddaughter warming her heart, for all of us. She reached the elevation, turning sharply, the spear pointed at the beast's chest for a final desperate deflection, forcing it into a mistake. The buffalo was a few yards away, its eyes red with fury, the darkness of night falling. The fate of Anya and her village was about to be sealed in the icy, silent vastness of Yakutia. Anya stood atop the small elevation, the icy wind whipping her loose hair beneath her hood. The buffalo, a mountain of fury and muscle, stopped abruptly at her feet, its horns pointing at her like deadly spears. Its eyes, red and wild, burned in the growing darkness, reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight. The earth trembled under the impact of its stop, and Anya felt her heart leap into her throat. It was now. There was nowhere left to run, no time to hesitate. Boris's promise, Lyra's hungry gaze, the future of her village. Everything depended on this moment. She raised her spear, not in a gesture of direct attack, but as a barrier, a focal point. Her grandmother always said, when strength is scarce, the mind must be a river that diverts rocks. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning in her lungs, but bringing an unexpected clarity. She needed to use the buffalo's own energy against it, the fury that propelled it, the mass that made it so formidable. The buffalo charged, a guttural roar tearing through the air. It was a sound of pure rage, of indomitable force. Anya waited, muscles tense, every fiber of her body prepared. At the last instant, when the horns were inches from piercing her, she threw herself to the side, using the elevation as a pivot. The spear, which she held firm, did not pierce, but struck the buffalo's shoulder, not with force to wound, but to deflect, to push. The buffalo, with its colossal momentum, was caught by surprise. The elevation, combined with Anya's subtle push on its shoulder, forced its weight onto its left front leg. The same one she had noticed was its weak point. The animal grunted, a sound of confusion and despair as it tried to regain its balance. Its hooves slipped on the ice of the elevation, and for an instant the giant staggered, its front legs giving way. Anya saw the opportunity. With a cry that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, a cry from all the women of her lineage, she pushed the spear again, this time with more force, not to wound, but to further destabilize, aiming at the buffalo's side, where the inclination was already evident. The buffalo, already unbalanced and with its weight concentrated on its weak leg, could not resist. It fell, not with a dry thud, but with a crash that made the earth tremble, rolling down the small elevation and sinking into a deep snowdrift that Anya had barely noticed in the growing darkness. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the howling wind and Anya's ragged breath. She approached the edge of the drift, her heart pounding erratically. The buffalo was trapped, its legs flailing uselessly in the deep snow, its massive body unable to move. Its eyes, once full of fury, now showed a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. Anya felt a pang of sadness. There was no joy in victory, only the weight of necessity. She knelt in the snow, the spear still in her trembling hands. The darkness of night swallowed the tundra, but a new light, the light of hope, began to shine in her heart. She had succeeded. She had overcome fear, prejudice, nature itself. Tears, warm and salty, streamed down her face, not of sadness, but of relief and profound gratitude. Boris, her grandmother, Lyra, the entire village, they were safe, at least for now. The challenge was not over, for now she needed to drag the 11,000-pound beast back to the village, a task that seemed impossible. But Anya knew that, with the same courage and cunning that had brought her this far, she would find a way. True strength, she realized, was not in bringing down the giant, but in carrying the burden of hope. She looked up at the starry Yakutian sky, a blanket of diamonds over the darkness, and felt the presence of her ancestors. Proud, the village would be fed, Lyra would live, and Anya, the widow, had become a legend. Anya, kneeling in the snow, felt the cold of the earth rise through her legs, but the exhaustion was deeper than any ice. The sight of the buffalo, motionless in the drift, was a triumph, but also the beginning of a new and overwhelming challenge. How would she move a mountain of flesh and bone, alone, under the advancing darkness? Her muscles screamed, every fiber of her body ached. The spear, once a symbol of her courage, now seemed a useless weight in her trembling hands. The momentary relief of victory was swallowed by the immensity of the task. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way, and she fell to her knees again, head bowed, the vapor of her breath mingling with the icy air. "Boris," she whispered, her voice choked. "How will I do this?" The tundra, once a stage for her cunning, now seemed to mock her fragility. The buffalo, though trapped, was a colossus. She imagined tying ropes, trying to leverage it. But the strength required seemed beyond any human. The image of hungry Lyra flickered in her mind, a beacon of urgency, but also a source of despair. What if she failed now? After everything, the weight of the village, which had once propelled her, threatened to crush her. A warm tear streamed down, freezing almost instantly on her cheek. She closed her eyes, seeking ancestral wisdom. Her grandmother's voice, Boris's strength, but the deepening silence of the night answered only with the howling wind. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the silence, a soft, rhythmic creak, like wood on packed snow. Anya opened her eyes, her heart pounding. A predator. She gripped her spear, raising it with renewed effort, adrenaline flowing. But the sound was not animal, it was something more. Human. A figure emerged in the gloom, dragging something heavy. Anya squinted, trying to discern the shape. As it drew closer, the silhouette became clearer. A man bent under the weight of a small wooden sled, pulled by a wide strap over his shoulders. It was Nikolai, old Nikolai with his white beard and eyes that always carried deep skepticism. The same Nikolai who had said a woman couldn't bring down the tundra buffalo. Anya felt a mixture of shock and fury. What was he doing here? He should be in the village, safe. Nikolai stopped a few yards away, panting, his face red and marked by cold and effort. In his gloved hands, he held a thick rope and a set of rustic but sturdy pulleys. His eyes, once skeptical, now shone with a different light, a mixture of concern and newfound respect. He said nothing for a moment, just watched Anya, then the buffalo in the drift, and then looked back at her, a small, tired smile appearing on his cracked lips. I couldn't let you do this alone, Anya, he said, his voice hoarse with cold and emotion. He coughed, pulling the sled a little closer. I saw your light from afar. I thought you'd need help with the transport. I brought my father's sled and these pulleys. He used them to move heavy logs. He gestured to the equipment, his movements slow and careful. It's not a man's strength that moves mountains, Anya. It's cunning and unity. Anya felt a lump in her throat. Nikolai's words, so unexpected, touched her soul. The fury dissipated, replaced by an overwhelming wave of gratitude and relief. She had felt so alone, so overwhelmed, And now there was Nikolai, the skeptic, the elder, offering not only physical help, but a testament of faith, of human connection. Her eyes welled up again, but this time they were tears of hope. She stood, swaying, and took a step towards him, extending her trembling hand. "Nikolai," she began, but the words were lost in a sob. He squeezed her hand firmly, a gesture of solidarity worth more than 1,000 words. The challenge of dragging the buffalo was still monumental, but now it was no longer impossible. The darkness of night was still cruel, but the light of unity had emerged on the tundra. Anya, her hands still clasped in Nikolai's, felt the warmth of solidarity spread through her exhausted body. The lump in her throat loosened, and a faint but genuine smile lit up her cold, chapped face. "Nikolai," she managed to say this time, her voice still choked. You came." He nodded, his blue eyes, once so full of distrust, now reflecting a glimmer of respect and camaraderie. No one should carry such a heavy burden alone. Anya, not even the strongest woman in Yakutia. His words, spoken with a simplicity that disarmed any lingering pride, were a balm to Anya's soul. He released her hand and turned to the sled, pulling the ropes and pulleys out of the snow. "Come, we have no time to lose. Night does not forgive those who hesitate." Anya watched him with silent admiration. The elder, whom she had thought to be a social obstacle, now became a pillar of support. Together, they approached the drift where the buffalo lay. The task of tying ropes to the colossal body of the beast seemed at first glance impossible. The animal, though immobilized, was still an imposing presence, a reminder of nature's power. Nikolai, with the wisdom of years of life on the tundra, began to explain his plan. "We need levers, Anya, and patience. The pulleys will reduce the effort, but the snow is our enemy and ally. It can help us slide the weight, but also trap us." He pointed to strategic spots on the buffalo's body where the ropes would be most effective. His fingers, though aged, were agile and experienced. Anya, following his instructions, began to dig in the packed snow around the drift, creating a path for the ropes. The work was arduous, each movement a battle against the cold and fatigue. Her muscles protested, but Nikolai's presence, his silent support and determination, were new fuel. She remembered Boris, how he always said that the true strength of a people lies in unity, and there they were, a widow and an elder, defying the tundra together. Nikolai, with Anya's help, managed to pass the thicker ropes under the buffalo's body, a feat that alone would have been unthinkable. He used Anya's spear as an improvised support to lift the heavy body enough to slide the ropes underneath. Sweat streamed down Anya's face, despite the cold, and her breath formed small clouds in the air. They fixed the pulleys to ice and rock stakes that Nikolai had brought, carefully driven into the snow. "Now, Anya," he said, panting, "the hardest part. We need to create a ramp of packed snow to get him out of the drift, and then pull." The work of compacting the snow with their feet and hands was exhausting, but they worked at a steady pace, a synchronized dance of effort and hope. With each layer of packed snow, the ramp took shape, a promise of movement. Anya felt a connection to the earth, to the challenge, and now to the unexpected partnership. The darkness of night deepened, but the light of the moon and stars, incredibly bright in Yakutia, guided their movements. The buffalo, its eyes still open, seemed to watch them, a silent witness to their struggle. Anya felt a renewed respect for the creature, for its strength and for its life that would now be the life of her people. Finally, the ramp was ready. Nikolai tied the main rope to the sled, and Anya positioned herself beside him, her hands firm on the auxiliary rope. "Together, Anya," Nikolai said, his eyes meeting hers, "for the village." They pulled, muscles tense, feet slipping in the snow. The buffalo moved an inch at a time, a sound of friction and effort filling the air. It was slow, painful progress, but it was progress. Hope, once a small glimmer, now ignited into a strong flame in Anya's heart. The tundra was relentless, but human unity was an even greater force. They continued pulling inch by inch under the watchful eyes of their ancestors and the promise of a tomorrow. Anya and Nikolai pulled, every fiber of their bodies screaming in protest. The buffalo, a colossal dead weight, slid an inch at a time up the packed snow ramp. The icy air cut their lungs with each forced breath, and the sweat which streamed down their foreheads quickly froze at the edges of their hoods. Anya's muscles burned, a deep pain that threatened to paralyze her. But the image of Lyra, with her hungry eyes, was an invisible whip that propelled her. She looked at Nikolai, the elder's face contorted in silent effort. His eyes, once so full of doubt, now reflected an unwavering determination, a mirror of Anya's own will. "Just a little more, Anya," Nikolai gasped, his voice hoarse but firm. He pulled the sled with surprising strength for his age, his knuckles white under his gloves. "He's almost out of the drift." Anya nodded, barely able to speak. Her own lips were cracked and numb from the cold. She felt the friction of the rope in her hands, the slippery snow under her feet, the constant tension in her shoulders. It was a battle not only against the buffalo's weight, but against the very exhaustion that tried to steal her strength and her hope. But Nikolai's presence, his unexpected support, was a warmth that defied the tundra's cold. He wasn't just helping to pull, he was sharing the burden, and that in itself was a miracle. With a final coordinated effort, a muffled cry from Nikolai and a groan from Anya, the buffalo finally broke free from the drift, sliding heavily onto the flatter surface of the tundra. The sound of its body dragging through the snow was a sound of victory, an echo of human resilience. They fell into the snow, exhausted, but with a smile of relief on their lips. Anya looked at the buffalo, now lying on Nikolai's sled, the dark mass contrasting with the whiteness of the snow under the moonlight. It was a magnificent sight, a testament to their courage and the unity that had made the impossible possible. Nikolai got up first, wiping snow from his beard. He extended a hand to Anya, a gesture of respect and camaraderie that she accepted with gratitude. "Well done, Anya," he said, his voice still breathless, but with a tone of admiration she had never heard before. No one would have believed that two could move such a beast. Anya felt a wave of emotion. Nikolai's words, once so harsh, were now a balm. "We are not just two, Nikolai," she replied with a sparkle in her eyes. "We are the village. We are Boris. We are Lyra. We are all those who wait." He smiled, a tired but warm smile. "Yes, Anya, and the village will be proud of you. All of us will be." Today, the challenge, however, was far from over. The buffalo was on the sled, but the journey back to the village, across the vast and icy tundra, was still a monumental ordeal. The distance was great, and the night's cold intensified with each passing minute. They needed a plan, more strength, more hope. Anya knew the next stage would be even more difficult. But now she was not alone. Nikolai began to inspect the fastenings, ensuring the buffalo was securely attached to the sled. "We need more ropes, Anya," he said thoughtfully, "and a way to distribute the weight. My father's sled is strong, but this weight, it's too much for a single point of traction." Anya approached, her mind already working. "I have the ropes I used for the hunt," she offered, pointing to her backpack. "We can use them to create a wider harness system, distributing the force between the two of us." Nikolai nodded, his eyes shining with approval. "A good idea, Anya. Your mind is as sharp as your spear." As they worked under the silver moonlight, tying ropes and adjusting the improvised harness, Anya felt a deep connection with the elder beside her. The prejudice that once separated them had melted in the furnace of danger and necessity. They were two human beings, united by a greater purpose, fighting against relentless nature to protect their community. Every knot they tightened, every adjustment they made was an act of faith, a silent vow that they would not give up. The tundra, with its silent vastness, seemed to watch them, testing their will. But Anya and Nikolai, side by side, were ready to face whatever came. The village waited, and they would return, carrying not only the meat that would feed their hungry, but also undeniable proof that true strength lies in unity and unconditional love. The wind howled, but it could not extinguish the flame of hope that burned in their hearts, promising a new dawn for their people. With the improvised harness firmly adjusted over their shoulders, Anya and Nikolai positioned themselves. The main rope, now divided, connected them to the sled, distributing the colossal weight of the buffalo. The first pull was a test of their combined strengths. Anya's muscles contracted, the familiar pain returning with renewed intensity, but Nikolai's presence beside her was a balm. He, with his stooped posture and white beard, seemed like an ancient tundra oak, rooted and unshakable. "Slowly, Anya," Nikolai instructed, his voice a little stronger now, with authority. "Small steps. The ice can be treacherous." They began to move, one step at a time, their feet sinking and slipping in the snow. The sled creaked, the wood groaning under the load, and the buffalo dragged, leaving a deep furrow in the untouched landscape, a visible trail of their effort. Every meter gained was a victory, celebrated by the silence of their synchronized efforts and breaths. Anya felt the weight of the buffalo and the responsibility, relieved by the hope Nikolai had brought. He, in turn, watched Anya with growing admiration. The widow, whom he had underestimated, showed a resilience that rivaled the tundra itself. His eyes, once skeptical, now saw in her not only the huntress, but the leader, the protector. With each pull, each slip, each shared exhaustion, the barrier between them crumbled. He remembered his wife, who had passed away winters ago, and the silent strength she possessed. Anya was of similar fiber, forged in adversity. Night advanced, and the stars twinkled intensely in the dark Yakutian sky. The cold deepened, biting at their skin and turning the vapor of their breath into fleeting clouds. Anya felt her feet numb, the icy wind penetrating her bones. But giving up was not an option. She thought of Lyra, of her smile, of her eyes full of expectation, of Boris, of the promise made and the strength he always believed she possessed. Nikolai, noticing Anya's fatigue, suggested a pause. "A moment, Anya. We need to conserve our strength." They stopped, muscles trembling, bodies protesting. Anya bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. The silence of the tundra was almost oppressive, broken by the sound of their pounding hearts. Nikolai approached, took a leather flask from his backpack and offered it to Anya. "Herbal tea, it warms body and spirit." Anya took the flask with trembling fingers, felt the warmth of the liquid spread down her throat, a welcome relief. She looked at Nikolai, her eyes meeting his in the dark. "Thank you, Nikolai," she whispered, with palpable gratitude in her voice. He just nodded, a smile on his lips. "We are one now, Anya. One purpose." The words of the man who had doubted her were warmer than the tea, rekindling the flame in her heart. They resumed their journey, the pace a little slower, but their determination unwavering. The buffalo, a heavy burden, transformed with each step into a symbol of shared victory, of human resilience. The village, still invisible on the distant horizon, was the beacon in the icy darkness, a promise of life and a future where the strength of a woman and the unity of a people would be remembered forever. They resumed their journey, the pace a little slower, but their determination unwavering, The buffalo, a heavy burden, transformed with each step into a symbol of shared victory, of human resilience. The village, still invisible on the distant horizon, was the beacon in the icy darkness, a promise of life and a future where the strength of a woman and the unity of a people would be remembered forever. Anya felt every muscle in her body protest, a pain radiating from her shoulders to the tips of her numb fingers. The icy air burned in her lungs with each deep breath, and the snow beneath her feet seemed to drain her energy with every step, but she was not alone. Beside her, Nikolai pulled with silent tenacity, his wrinkled face contorted in concentrated effort. With each groan of the sled, each slip in the snow, their gazes met, a wordless communication that said, "We are in this together." Nikolai, in turn, watched Anya with growing admiration. The widow, whom he had underestimated and whose words he had doubted, showed a resilience that rivaled the tundra itself. His eyes, once skeptical, now saw in her not only the fearless huntress, but the leader, the tireless protector of her people. With each pull, each slip, each shared exhaustion, the barrier of prejudice between them crumbled, replaced by mutual respect and deep camaraderie. He remembered his wife, who had passed away many winters ago, and the silent strength she possessed. Anya was of similar fiber, forged in adversity, and he felt ashamed of his former blindness. Night advanced, and the stars twinkled intensely in the dark Yakutian sky, a spectacle of beauty, indifferent to the struggle below. The cold deepened, biting at exposed skin and turning the vapor of their breath into fleeting clouds that dissipated in the air. Anya felt her feet numb, the icy wind penetrating her bones, but giving up was not an option. She thought of Lyra, of her smile, of her eyes full of expectation, of Boris, of the promise made and the strength he always believed she possessed. With each thought, a new breath, a new strength emerged. Advancing over a snow ridge, the sled suddenly sank into a softer snowdrift, paralyzing their progress. The buffalo, with its colossal weight, seemed to have rooted itself to the ground. Anya and Nikolai pulled with all their might, but the sled did not move. A sigh of frustration escaped Anya's lips. Nikolai, panting, pointed to a cluster of frozen bushes a little ahead. "We need levers, Anya, and a firmer path." With renewed effort, they disentangled themselves from the ropes and, using their gloved hands, began to break the thicker branches from the bushes, transforming them into rustic poles. Anya, with her spear, helped compact the snow in front of the sled, clearing a more solid path. Nikolai, with his ancestral wisdom, positioned the branches under the sled, using them as improvised rollers. Their eyes met again, and a smile of determination appeared on Anya's cracked lips. The obstacle was great, but their unity was greater. They reattached themselves to the harness, their hearts pounding with renewed hope. "Together, Anya," Nikolai said, his voice hoarse, but full of conviction. "For the village." With a muffled cry they pulled, and the sled, with an agonizing creak, began to move again, sliding over the improvised rollers. With each meter gained, the image of the village became clearer in their minds, a beacon of warmth and life in the icy immensity. Dawn began to tint the horizon in pale shades of pink and orange, a promise that the longest night was coming to an end. The first rays of sun kissed the frozen landscape, transforming the monotonous white into a mosaic of soft colors. The air, still biting, seemed to vibrate with the promise of a new day, but for Anya and Nikolai, every step was a battle against exhaustion. The buffalo, a colossal weight, continued to drag itself on the improvised sled, leaving a deep furrow in the untouched snow of the tundra. Anya felt her legs heavy as logs, her muscles trembling with every effort. Her shoulders ached under the harness, and her breath came in ragged gasps, freezing in the air before dissipating. She looked at Nikolai, the elder's face marked by fatigue, but his blue eyes still shone with unwavering determination. He was an unexpected pillar of strength, and his presence beside her was what kept her from collapsing. "We're almost there, Anya," Nikolai said, his voice hoarse, but with a tone of encouragement that warmed her heart. He pointed to a distant rise, where a thin column of smoke lazily rose into the morning sky. Smoke from the village. They're awake. A wave of hope, as powerful as the cold that enveloped her, swept through Anya. The sight of the smoke was a beacon, a vivid reminder of Lyra, of her hungry eyes, and of all the faces waiting for her. She pressed her lips together, feeling the moisture of ice on her eyelids, but refused to cry. Not now, not when victory was so close. They resumed their slow and painful pace, each step a silent prayer. The terrain, which seemed flatter in the dawn light, proved deceptive. Small undulations and deeper snowdrifts required redoubled effort, and the sled, at times, seemed to get stuck, refusing to move forward. Nikolai, with his decades of tundra experience, guided the way, choosing the less treacherous routes, using his spear to test the consistency of the snow. "Careful here, Anya," he warned, indicating an area where the ice under the snow could be slippery. "One false step could cost us dearly." Anya trusted him implicitly. The elder who had once challenged her with harsh words was now her guide and companion. As they approached, the silhouette of the village began to take shape on the horizon. The small wooden and fir cabins, once indistinct dots, were now visible, clustered like a small refuge against the white vastness. Anya felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of relief and overwhelming emotion. They had succeeded. Against all odds, against the relentless cold, against prejudice and doubt, they had brought hope back. Suddenly, a small dot moved at the village entrance. Then another, and another. Children. Lyra. Anya's heart leapt. She could imagine her, with her big, curious eyes, pointing at the strange procession approaching. The sight renewed her strength, injecting an adrenaline that seemed to burn away the fatigue in her veins. She pulled with more vigor, teeth clenched, determination etched on her face. Nikolai, noticing the change in Anya's pace, smiled. "They saw us," he said, his voice filled with pride. "The buffalo is too big to go unnoticed." He also increased his pace, his steps slow but firm, matching Anya's urgency. The distance between them and the village diminished with each passing minute, and the muffled sound of voices began to reach their ears, carried by the wind. The village was waking up, and it wasn't just the sun that brought them warmth. Anya felt her eyes well up, but this time they were tears of pure joy and gratitude. Gratitude for Nikolai, for his unexpected help, for his renewed faith. Gratitude for the strength she didn't know she possessed. Gratitude for Boris, whose memory propelled her. And gratitude for life, which, even in the cruelest tundra, found a way to flourish through unity and love. The climax was in sight, not just the arrival at the village, but the redefinition of a community. Proof that true strength resided in the unbreakable will to protect those one loves. The first villagers were already emerging from their cabins, rubbing their eyes, pointing at the diminutive figures of Anya and Nikolai, and at the dark mass they dragged. The murmur grew, transforming into exclamations of surprise and disbelief. Anya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her people's gaze, but also the warmth of acceptance. She was no longer just the widow, but the huntress, the savior. She was hope. As they drew closer, the crowd at the village entrance grew. Tired faces, marked by hunger and cold, began to light up with a mixture of shock and a hope that seemed to sprout from the frozen ground. Lyra, small and wrapped in furs, ran ahead, her eyes wide with surprise at seeing her mother and the elder pulling the colossal creature. She stopped a few yards away, a mix of fear and admiration on her childish face, before letting out a cry of pure joy and running into Anya's arms. Anya released the ropes for an instant, kneeling in the snow to embrace her daughter. The warmth of Lyra's small body against hers was the balm she needed, the reward for every painful step, for every aching muscle. She kissed the top of Lyra's head, feeling warm tears stream down her cold face. "We did it, my little one," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We did it!" Nikolai, with a tired but proud smile, watched the scene. He knew that moment was more than the arrival of food, it was the rebirth of faith. The other villagers, now closer, began to gather around the buffalo, touching its thick hide with reverence, their murmurs of admiration filling the air. Elder Ivan, the oldest in the village, approached, his eyes moist. He extended his hand to Anya, a gesture of deep respect. "Anya," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "you brought life back to us. You are the strength our people needed." Nikolai stepped forward, raising his voice to the crowd. "This woman," he declared, pointing to Anya, who now stood, Lyra nestled beside her, "faced the tundra, prejudice, and death itself to feed us. I doubted her, but she proved to be the bravest among us. She is the huntress Boris always knew she would be. She is the hope of our village." A chorus of voices rose, no longer of doubt, but of acclaim and gratitude. Women wept, men nodded in respect, and the children, once hungry, now looked at Anya with eyes full of admiration. The sight of the buffalo, imposing even in death, was the promise of abundance, the end of a winter of privation. With everyone's help, the sled was pulled to the center of the village. The tasks of butchering the meat would be long and arduous, but they would be done with joy and renewed purpose. Anya, exhausted but with an overflowing heart, felt the unbreakable connection with her people. She was no longer the solitary widow, but the guardian of life, the weaver of a new future. The tundra was still relentless, but the village, united by the courage of one woman, was ready to face any winter. The flame of hope, lit by Anya, burned strong, promising warmth and life for all. The flame of hope, lit by Anya, burned strong, promising warmth and life for all. The morning sun, now higher, bathed the village in a golden glow, revealing a scene of rebirth. The colossal buffalo lying in the snow was the center of feverish and joyful activity. Men and women, with sharp knives and determined gazes, began to work, guided by the experience of the elders. Nikolai, his voice hoarse but full of energy, coordinated the tasks, distributing portions and ensuring that each family received its fair share. Hunger, which had once loomed like a shadow, began to recede, replaced by a murmur of gratitude and relief. Lyra, her face still marked by tears of joy, but now with a sparkle in her eyes, clung to her mother. She held Anya's hand, squeezing it from time to time, as if to make sure it was all real. Anya, sitting on a fur-covered log, watched her people. Exhaustion still weighed in her bones, but the sight of Lyra eating a piece of cooked meat with a satisfied smile was the sweetest of rewards. She felt a deep peace, a sense of duty fulfilled that surpassed any physical pain. Elder Ivan, with the dignity that his years conferred upon him, approached Anya. His eyes, once filled with worry, now shone with unquestionable admiration. He knelt slightly, an unusual gesture of respect, and took Anya's hand, squeezing it with both of his. "Anya," he said, his voice choked, "you not only brought us food, you brought us back to ourselves, the faith we had lost, the courage we thought we had forgotten. You are the guardian of our soul." Anya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Ivan's words, from the spiritual leader of the village, were a recognition worth more than any treasure. She merely nodded, unable to speak, her eyes welling up again. In the days that followed, the village transformed. The smell of roasted meat and warm broths filled the air. The children, once lethargic, ran and played in the snow, their laughter echoing across the tundra. The women, with lighter countenances, wove and sewed, sharing stories and plans for the future. The men, with renewed strength, began to repair the cabins and prepare for the next season, with an energy that seemed to have been awakened from the deepest sleep. Anya, though still recovering from the arduous journey, found her place of honor. People sought her out, not only for her hunting wisdom, but for advice, for her silent strength. She became the voice of hope, the personification of resilience. Nikolai, now her most loyal defender, never missed an opportunity to tell the story of the hunt, always emphasizing Anya's courage and cunning, and his own initial blindness. He looked at her with an almost reverential respect, a frequent smile on his lips. Lyra blossomed under the renewed attention and love, her laughter the sweetest melody in the village. She knew her mother was a hero, a living legend, but to her, Anya was simply her mother, the one who would always protect her. The winter was still long, but the threat of hunger had been averted. The village had learned that even in the most extreme conditions, unity, altruism, and the courage of a single heart could move mountains, or, in this case, an 11 Yuzhn-pound buffalo. The story of Anya and the tundra buffalo would be told for generations, a reminder that true strength resided not in muscles, but in the unbreakable will to protect those one loves. And so, in the frozen heart of Yakutia, Anya's flame burned, an eternal beacon of hope and humanity. And so, in the frozen heart of Yakutia, Anya's flame burned, an eternal beacon of hope and humanity. The months unfolded, dictated by the sun gaining strength and the winds that, though biting, whispered promises of thaw. The village, once plunged into despair, now pulsed with renewed vitality. The colossal buffalo's meat had fed everyone, and its hides, treated, became warm clothing and coverings, offering long-forgotten comfort. Anya, the widow who became a legend, did not rest. She continued to be the first to wake, the last to sleep, her vigilant eyes observing the tundra, anticipating her people's needs. Her steps were accompanied by silent respect and admiration. The village women, once hesitant, sought her out to share fears and hopes, looking to her not only as a huntress, but as a counselor, a sister. They gathered around the fire, weaving and telling stories, Anya's always the most requested, retold with the fervor of true inspiration. Lyra, in turn, blossomed like a rare flower in the snow. Her eyes, once marked by hunger, now shone with the curiosity and joy of a secure and loved child. She followed her mother like a shadow, learning the names of the stars, the trails of animals, the importance of every herb. Anya taught her with patience, with a love that overflowed in every gesture. Sometimes Lyra nestled in her mother's arms, listening to the beats of her heart, and Anya felt the promise of a brighter future pulsating there in her little daughter. Nikolai, the blue-eyed elder, had become the most fervent guardian of Anya's memory. In every gathering, he recalled his own blindness, his initial doubt, and how Anya, with her unwavering courage, had transformed not only the village's fortune, but also his own heart. He spoke with contagious passion, his gestures firm and his hoarse voice echoing the truth. True strength, he repeated, is not just in the hunt, but in the soul that refuses to give up, in the faith that moves mountains of ice. Winters would continue to be harsh in Yakutia. The tundra would always present new challenges, but the village had changed. The experience of near starvation and the subsequent salvation at Anya's hands had forged an unbreakable bond. They learned to trust each other more deeply, to value every portion of food, every ray of sun, every child's laughter. Altruism was no longer a choice, but the essence of their survival. The cabins, once isolated, now seemed closer, sharing resources, dreams, and burdens. Anya, looking at the horizon, no longer saw only the icy immensity and its threats. She saw the promise, the resilience of her people, the flame she herself had rekindled. The ancestral wisdom, which Boris had whispered in her dreams, was now a living melody, sung by the entire village. The legend of the tundra buffalo was not just about an impossible hunt, but about the human capacity to transcend fear, to find strength in vulnerability, and to transform pain into a greater purpose. And so, life continued, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Anya, the widow who became a legend, walked through the snow, no longer alone but carrying the love and hope of an entire community in her heart. Yakutia, with its wild beauty and relentless cold, was now the stage for a story of triumph, where human connection and the unbreakable will to protect those one loves shone brighter than any star in the frozen sky. Anya's flame, the beacon of hope, burned stronger than ever, warming not only the village, but the tundra itself, with the promise that as long as there was love, there would be life.